I asked you to defend. I've seen you defend before, and you're gonna do it here. If that's how we're gonna battle, we're not gonna have a chance to win. Jesus Christ, how much time do we have to talk about it?
For every player, there's one coach they'd go through a wall for, and another they wish they'd never met. These are the stories of the leaders who built legends, and the tyrants who broke them. This is the most loved and most hated coaches in NHL history. First up, the ultimate tyrant. Nicknamed Iron Mike, Keenan was a brilliant but tyrannical coach who was notoriously impossible to play for. He had a simple, brutal philosophy: win at all costs, even if it meant destroying every relationship in the process. His career is a cautionary tale of a man who could bring a team to the top of the mountain, but whose methods were so extreme that he would immediately burn the entire mountain down. Keenan's coaching style was built on a foundation of psychological warfare. He ruled through fear and conflict, believing that keeping his players constantly on edge was the key to victory. He would bench superstars for no reason, publicly humiliate players in the media, and was famous for his bizarre goalie pulling tactics. Sometimes yanking a goalie mid-game, not for a bad play, but simply as a mind game. He once made his Chicago Blackhawks team take a pre-game skate, bus to the airport, fly to Quebec, and check into a hotel before telling them the game was actually back in Chicago, all just to test them mentally. His reign of terror was famous for his feuds with his own star players. In St. Louis, he engaged in a legendary public war with superstar Brett Hull, one of the greatest goal scorers of all time. Keenan publicly ripped his game, stripped him of his alternate captaincy, and created a relationship so toxic that Hull later called him a terrible man.
But, I will never forgive him for what he did while he was here and what he did to this organization.
But the ultimate Keenan story is his time with the New York Rangers. In 1994, he was hired to do one thing: end the team's 54-year Stanley Cup curse. And he did it. He pushed, prodded, and bullied the team to a legendary championship. But his methods were so abrasive that just 30 days after the victory parade, he was gone. His relationship with the players and management was so completely broken that he used a loophole to leave the team he had just led to glory. Mike Keenan is remembered as a brilliant hockey mind who left a trail of burned bridges and traumatized players across the league. Mike Keenan was a coach who ruled through chaos and fear, but our next coach built a dynasty with the exact opposite approach: quiet intelligence and unwavering calm. Meet Al Arbour. If Mike Keenan was a coachy tyrant, Al Arbour was the patient teacher, known as Radar for his signature thick glasses and his studious approach to the game. Arbour is a beloved legend on Long Island, the quiet architect who turned the expansion New York Islanders into one of the most dominant dynasties in the history of sports. Arbour's style was the complete opposite of a screamer. He commanded respect through his calm, steady leadership and his brilliant defensive mind. He took over the Islanders just 1 year after their inception and patiently built them into a powerhouse. The result was a level of dominance that will likely never be seen again. Under his leadership, the Islanders won 4 consecutive Stanley Cups, from 1980 to 1983. During that incredible run, they won 19 consecutive playoff series, a record that still stands across all major professional sports. But Arbour is loved for more than just the wins. He's loved for his methods. He created a family-like atmosphere in the locker room, a band of brothers that was fiercely loyal to him and to each other. There are countless stories of his quiet leadership, but one stands out. In one legendary moment after a tough playoff loss, instead of yelling at his team, Arbour quietly walked down the aisle of a team plane and handed each player a beer. It was a simple act of trust that relaxed the team, and they went on to win the series. His loyalty to the Islanders was absolute, and that loyalty was returned in one of the most emotional moments in coaching history. In 2007, long after he had retired, the 75-year-old Arbour, who had coached 1,499 games for the franchise, was asked to sign a one-day contract to come back and coach his 1,500th game. He did, and he won. A perfect tribute to the man who built the franchise from the ground up. Al Arbour is a beloved icon, a coach who proved that a dynasty could be built with patience, intelligence, and respect. Al Arbour built a dynasty on trust, but our next coach built his reputation on fear, and it all came crashing down. Enter Mike Babcock. For over a decade, Mike Babcock was seen as the smartest man in the room. He had a reputation as a brilliant, demanding, and detail-oriented coach who was a certified winner. He had a Stanley Cup with the Detroit Red Wings in 2008 and 2 Olympic gold medals with Team Canada. When the Toronto Maple Leafs signed him to a massive contract in 2015, he was supposed to be the final piece of their championship puzzle. But after his firing from Toronto in 2019, his pristine image was completely shattered. A series of disturbing stories from former players began to emerge, revealing that behind the winning resume was a pattern of psychological abuse and bullying, making him a modern-day cautionary tale. The most infamous story came from his time in Toronto during Mitch Marner's rookie season. Babcock reportedly cornered the young star and forced him to make a private list, ranking his teammates from the hardest working to the laziest. Babcock then took that private list and shared it with the players Marner had ranked at the bottom. It was a profound act of betrayal designed to humiliate a young player and turn the locker room against him. That was just the beginning. Former Red Wings forward Johan Franzen called Babcock a bully who picks on people, and shockingly, the worst person I have ever met. Franzen described years of verbal abuse, including a tirade on the bench during the 2012 playoffs that left him suffering a nervous breakdown. Babcock's career ended for good with one final bizarre scandal. In 2023, he was hired by the Columbus Blue Jackets in a final attempt at a comeback. But before he ever coached a single game, reports surfaced that he was demanding that his players show him the personal photos on their phones, a massive invasion of privacy that he claimed was just for getting to know them. The public backlash was so severe that he was forced to resign, ending his career in disgrace. Babcock's fall from grace was a landmark moment, proving that in the modern NHL, a winning reputation can no longer protect a coach who rules through fear and abuse. Mike Babcock was the modern tyrant whose players grew to hate him. But our next coach was the old-school tough guy who every player loved and respected. Meet Pat Burns. Pat Burns was the definition of tough but fair. A former police officer, he brought a blue-collar, no-nonsense mentality to every team he coached. He was a demanding, intense, and often intimidating presence behind the bench. But unlike the tyrants, Burns was also fiercely loyal and honest with his players, earning him a level of universal respect that is rare in the cutthroat world of coaching. His unique legacy is best captured by one incredible achievement. He's the only coach in NHL history to win the Jack Adams Award for Coach of the Year with 3 different teams. What makes that feat even more remarkable is that he did it with 3 bitter rivals: the Montreal Canadiens in 1989, the Toronto Maple Leafs in 1993, and the Boston Bruins in 1998. The fact that he could win over fan bases and locker rooms of 3 hated enemies is a testament to the profound respect he commanded. Players knew exactly where they stood with him. He would get in a star player's face if he wasn't playing well, but he would also be the first to defend his team to the media. He was honest, and his players loved him for it. But despite all of his regular season success, the one prize that had always eluded him was the Stanley Cup. In 2003, he finally got his chance. While coaching the New Jersey Devils, Burns, who was in the midst of a battle with cancer, led his team all the way to a dramatic Game 7 victory in the Stanley Cup final. The image of the tough, emotional Burns finally lifting the Stanley Cup over his head is one of the most beloved and powerful moments in the sport's history. It was the perfect culmination of a long and respected career. Pat Burns is a beloved legend, a coach who proved that you could be demanding and old school without ever losing the respect of your players. Pat Burns was a tough-as-nails coach who players loved. But our next coach is a throwback whose tough love style ultimately drove his players away. Meet Daryl Sutter. Daryl Sutter is a hockey man through and through, a gruff, no-nonsense rancher from Alberta. He is famous for his mumbling, short-tempered press conferences and a demanding, old-school coaching style that feels like a relic from a bygone era. He is a 2-time Stanley Cup winner, a coach whose heavy, punishing system can be incredibly effective. But his rise was controversial because that same old-school style has repeatedly clashed with the modern NHL player, most recently culminating in a full-scale locker room mutiny. Sutter's greatest success came with the Los Angeles Kings. His hard-nosed, defense-first system was a perfect fit for a veteran, battle-tested group of players like Anze Kopitar and Dustin Brown. His demanding approach squeezed every last drop of effort out of that roster, leading them to 2 Stanley Cup championships in 2012 and 2014. It proved his methods could work. But the game began to change, and Sutter refused to change with it. His most recent tenure with the Calgary Flames is a perfect case study of his controversial fall from grace. He was hired mid-season in 2021 and had an immediate impact, winning the Jack Adams Award as the league's best coach in 2022 after leading the Flames to a dominant season. But in the following year, the relationship completely imploded. Players reportedly grew to despise his relentlessly negative, condescending, and communication-lacking style. The biggest victim was superstar forward Jonathan Huberdeau. Calgary had just acquired Huberdeau after a spectacular 115-point season in Florida. But under Sutter's restrictive defensive system, Huberdeau's creativity was stifled. His production plummeted by an incredible 60 points, and he often looked like a broken player. The atmosphere in the locker room became so toxic that by the end of the season, multiple star players were reportedly ready to demand trades if Sutter was not fired. Management was forced to act, firing Sutter and publicly stating that a change was needed in the team's culture. Darryl Sutter is a cautionary tale of a successful coach whose refusal to adapt his old-school methods to a new generation of players made him a hated figure in his own locker room. Darryl Sutter is the story of an old-school coach whose style stopped working. But our next coach is the old-school genius who never stopped winning, the greatest of all time, Scotty Bowman. In the world of hockey coaching, there's Scotty Bowman, and then there's everyone else. He's the quiet genius, the master innovator, and the most decorated coach in the history of the sport. While he was never a warm, fuzzy players coach, Bowman is universally loved and revered for one simple reason. He was the ultimate winner, a man whose strategic brilliance led to an unprecedented and untouchable record of success. The numbers are staggering. Bowman has won 9 Stanley Cups as a head coach, the most in NHL history. His 1,244 regular season wins are also a record that will likely never be broken. What makes his legacy even more remarkable is that he won with 3 completely different franchises in 3 different decades, proving that his genius was adaptable to any era. He led the Montreal Canadiens dynasty of the 1970s, the superstar-led Pittsburgh Penguins of the 90s, and the dominant Detroit Red Wings of the 90s and 2000s. His coaching style was that of a chess master. He was often cold, distant, and famously unsentimental, treating his players like pieces on a board. But he saw the game on a different level than anyone else. He was a master at line matching, exploiting his opponent's weaknesses, and making brilliant in-game adjustments. He was also a true innovator. In Montreal, he perfected the systems that allowed their legendary roster to dominate the league. In Detroit, he was the architect of the famous Russian Five, a unit of 5 Russian players that he boldly put on the ice at the same time. This was a revolutionary move that unleashed a fluid, creative puck possession style of hockey that the league had never seen before. But his greatest strength was his ability to adapt his style to his personnel. His crowning achievement as a leader came in Detroit, where he famously challenged his captain, superstar scorer Steve Yzerman, to completely change his game. He convinced Yzerman to sacrifice personal stats to become a premier two-way defensive forward. That selfless transformation became the foundation of the Red Wings dynasty. Scotty Bowman is a revered legend, a quiet genius whose brilliant mind changed the game forever. Scotty Bowman was the quiet genius who coached from the shadows. But our next coach lives in the spotlight, a human volcano famous for his explosive temper and his wars with the media. Get ready for John Tortorella. John Tortorella, or Torts as he's widely known, is one of the most polarizing and controversial coaches in hockey history. He's a Stanley Cup champion and a 2-time winner of the Jack Adams Award, but he is most famous for his volcanic temper and his relentlessly confrontational style. His rise and long career have been a constant spectacle of media battles, public feuds with his own star players, and a demanding my way or the highway approach that has left a trail of burned bridges across the league. His press conferences are legendary, must-see TV for all the wrong reasons. For decades, he has engaged in profanity-laced tirades, storming out of press conferences and getting into shouting matches with reporters. He has built a reputation as the most combative and difficult coach for the media to deal with, a persona he seems to enjoy. His coaching philosophy is a strange contradiction. He preaches an aggressive, safe-as-death mindset, encouraging his teams to play with an offensive flair. Yet, his teams are most famous for a grueling, defense-first system that demands every player block shots relentlessly. This demanding shot-blocking style has been effective, but it has also been a source of major conflict with his skilled, offensive-minded players who feel stifled by the system. And Tortorella has never been afraid to go to war with the stars. In New York, he famously clashed with his top goal scorer, Marian Gaborik, but his most disastrous tenure came during his one and only season with the Vancouver Canucks in 2014. The team underperformed and his aggressive style wore thin, but the defining moment was a circus-like incident where he tried to storm the Calgary Flames locker room during an intermission to fight their coach, Bob Hartley. The incident got him suspended for 15 days and perfectly captured his explosive nature. His time in Columbus was a modern case study of his methods. He had success, but at a cost. He engaged in public, bitter feuds with his 2 most talented players, Pierre-Luc Dubois and Patrick Laine. He benched both of them, publicly called out their effort, and created relationships so broken that both star players eventually forced trades to get away from him. Even on the international stage, his style has created controversy. As the head coach for Team USA at the 2016 World Cup of Hockey, he controversially threatened to bench any player on his team who knelt during the national anthem, a protest inspired by Colin Kaepernick. The team, stacked with NHL superstars, then went on to have a disastrous tournament, failing to win a single game. John Tortorella is a proven winner, but his rise has been one of the most turbulent in history, a career defined by conflict and confrontation. John Tortorella is the coach who rules through anger and confrontation, but our final coach is a beloved legend who proved you can win with a completely different emotion, pure, infectious joy. It's always a great day for hockey with Badger Bob Johnson. In the history of hockey, there are few figures as universally loved and influential as Bob Johnson. Known as Badger Bob, he was a revolutionary innovator, a brilliant teacher, and a man whose boundless passion for the game was so infectious that it changed American hockey forever. His rise to an NHL champion is one of the most emotional and inspiring stories the sport has ever seen. His most famous catchphrase perfectly encapsulated his entire philosophy. It's a great day for hockey. He said it every day, and he meant it. He approached the game not as a job, but with a pure academic joy. He was a true student of the game, a pioneer who was one of the first North American coaches to seriously study the different systems and training methods of the European and Soviet teams. Before he ever coached in the NHL, he was a legend. He built the University of Wisconsin into a national powerhouse, winning 3 NCAA championships. He was a key architect of the rise of USA Hockey, coaching multiple national and Olympic teams and helping to put America hockey on the world map. After a stint with the Calgary Flames, he was hired by the Pittsburgh Penguins in 1990. The team was loaded with some of the most incredible offensive talent the league had ever seen, led by superstars Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr, but they were an undisciplined group that had never won anything. Badger Bob's positive, teaching-focused approach was the perfect antidote. He provided the structure, the belief, and the innovative systems that the talented but chaotic roster desperately needed. He was one of the first coaches to rely heavily on video analysis to teach his players. In his very first season, he led the Penguins to the 1991 Stanley Cup. The first in the franchise's history, it was the crowning achievement of his life's work. But the celebration was tragically short-lived. Just a few months after lifting the Stanley Cup, Johnson was diagnosed with brain cancer. He passed away in November 1991. The hockey world was devastated. The Penguins dedicated the following season to his memory. With Scotty Bowman taking over as coach, the team rallied and won the Stanley Cup again in 1992. In a deeply emotional and unprecedented tribute, the NHL gave the Penguins special permission to have Bob Johnson's name engraved on the Stanley Cup for a second time, even though he didn't coach that season. It was a testament to the profound and lasting impact he had on the team and the entire sport. Badger Bob is a beloved icon, a man whose passion and innovation left an indelible mark on the game he loved so much. It proves the most important battles in hockey aren't always on the ice. Sometimes they're fought on a whiteboard, in the media, and in the minds of the players themselves. It all comes down to the person behind the bench. So, who do you think is the best and worst coach of all time? Let the debate begin.